A chief consciousness officer is kind of like in the book Siddhartha, where there is one side of the river and there's an individual who rows you to the other side, right? It's a choice that individuals are going to start making, but that choice is going to be started to be made by a shift in consciousness, right? So when that shift happens, which is happening right now, you and I know that this is a shift that humanity's never experienced. The chief consciousness officer is going to be the boat guide, right? They're in a sense they're going to help people understand what's happening, that it's okay to cross to the other side. When that happens, which I believe it's happening right now, it's going to become kind of like our cell phones, our iPhones. You and I are used to it now. It's just, it naturally was let out over the last 15, 20 years. If you were to give an iPhone to someone back in the 70s or 80s, they would have lost their minds, right? So consciousness in the universe has a great way of subtly shifting people naturally, like a 22-year-old turning 23, and it just brings it up. Not much changes from 22 to 23, but we're 23. We're 365 days older. When this happens, I don't know exactly when people will start having more telepathic options like you talk about, because I know some people have that now. When they're able to tap into their higher self more naturally, when they have the clarity of consciousness to expand their awareness to tap in to more of the consciousness, knowledge structured in consciousness, because when we know better, we do better in a sense. It's just going to take time, but organizations, instead of being resistant to it, thinking that this shift is like other shifts in the past, they're going to need and they're going to want a chief consciousness officer, someone like you, someone like me, someone like the others who understand this on staff, to just be there to guide, to help customer service agents or mid-level managers or VPs or executives. Their different thoughts are going to come up, right? Everything they've suppressed their entire existence is going to come up. They've been confident for decades. They've been clear on their path. They've been understanding of how business works and the dynamics between a boss and an employee. The veil has thinned so much that the, lack of better words, their bullshit meter is off the charts. So an executive will look at them with a smile on their face and say, we really appreciate you, what you've done for us. The employee will know that what they said is not what they meant. That causes incredible amounts of division, which we're seeing right now. So executives are doing the same thing they've always done. They may have changed it a little, but not in the way you and I are talking. And they're wondering why the gap is widening. They're wondering why their employees are more upset than usual. They're wondering why HR is having such an issue in hiring the people they need to hire. Because that's another thing. HR is always going to go after the same 5 steps and the same individuals that got them to this place. Well, this place is falling apart. A chief consciousness officer is going to help HR start to hire more clear individuals, higher level of consciousness individuals, people who will collaborate more, people who will be more dynamic in how they interact from day to day with each other. Because a lot of people spend more time with the people they work with than their families. But we always spend a lot of time figuring out our families and our spouse and our kids and everything else. But at work, it's just kind of like the side project, and HR implements a wellness program that no one cares about. The CEO signs off on the budget begrudgingly because they don't think it's worth it. And then they wonder why there's this unique energy and unique culture that's kind of fallen apart. So this discussion is being discussed more. I'm seeing more and more people talk about consciousness in the right way, not in a right or wrong way, but in the way that is going to merge those worlds. Because there's quite a few people that want to destroy companies and capitalism and money and everything else, but they don't have an alternative. It's like a Catholic becoming an atheist, a Republican becoming a Democrat. It's heads the tails of the coin. We need to just subtly, as we age, as we raise in consciousness, as the universe knows that we need to subtly shift, we need to do the same thing in business. And the next logical step, as well as you know, is consciousness. It's always been there, but we need to make people aware of it. Businesses have, really cool quotes on the wall, and their HR has put in something in the booklet of what their values are. Very few people live that. Look at the world. Look at the business. Look at how divided are. Look how conflicted we are. So we can consultants and everybody and coaches can talk about how we need to implement this, and CEOs and executives can talk till they're blue in the face of what their values are, what their core principles are, how much they care about their employees. It's not working. It's not working because the world is shifting in a way we've never seen before, and we need guidance. We need that person who will take us from this side of the river to the next side of the river, because that person's just rowing a boat. Nothing intelligent about it, nothing special about it. They're just there to make people go to the other side on their own accord. So a chief consciousness officer would most likely report to the CEO, but not have authority over any group in the company. They would be the glue. They would be they would be the warmer. And the reason I use that word is there's a movie called The Cooler with William H. Macy. And he's called The Cooler because a casino hires him when someone's playing blackjack and doing really well, or someone's at a roulette table and doing really well. They bring him in to grab a drink and go sit on that table. His energy cools the table. It cools the roulette table, and they crap out or they stop winning cards. So a chief consciousness officer, I bring that example up to show chief consciousness officer would be the polar opposite. They would walk into a room, into a C-suite, into a bunch of meetings, and they would raise the consciousness of everyone in the room so there was less division, less conflict, and less walls. There was more authenticity, even if at a subtle level. That person would be around the watering hole talking to customer service and middle-level managers and VPs and just helping people understand their biases, their conditioning. And when someone at that neutral level asks a question, they will start to understand it's just out of pure curiosity. It's not to judge. It's not to fire them. It's not to have something on them. And when they finally get to feel that neutrality, it's amazing what they will share. They will talk about consciousness. They will talk about voices they hear. They will talk about seeing angels or different dimensions. And when you get that out of them, which they probably never shared with their family or their spouse or any of their friends, you start to realize how many people have had that experience. And maybe Susie, who had that experience, who doesn't like Ed because he's a Republican and she's a Democrat, you can say, Ed had that same experience. And we can start to take the fear and the magic, in a sense, out of the unknown. We can make it known because everything's consciousness. And once people better understand what consciousness is, it doesn't matter if they're in second grade going into third, it will make them more open. And that's all we need. We just need a little subtle more openness for less division and conflict. There's a lot of conscious capitalism. There's a lot of people in the consciousness world, a lot of people on the spiritual path that come into business with just as much ego as the business owner has or the CEO has, thinking that they are right and the CEO's wrong. Approach the owners, the executives, make them feel that it's all one, all love, and that we need to make a massive shift. We've tried that. It doesn't work. We've spent the last 20 years with spiritual escapism and wellness programs. Question to you and every person that I've been talking to lately is, how's it working? Truly, like all of these wellness programs, for the last 2 decades, we've done nothing but talk about meditation, yoga, the spiritual path, mindfulness, and how these larger organizations like Google and Facebook and all these big time players have sleep pods, and they bring in yoga instructors and they bring in mindfulness, and they've got wellness programs. Medium and large companies and small companies have jumped on board with that as well. The world's never been so chaotic. The world's never been so divided. So how is it working? Because the last 20 years, the reason we did what we did was, I think a lot of people's hearts were in the right place, but it was an inauthentic from the people who implemented them. The people who wanted to bring mindfulness to the organizations, who thought it would be good to de-stress people in a company were right, but they were so far off on the right that they had left the business world behind. They've left corporate America behind. They left money behind. They went off and had a great teacher and had some great meditation experiences and became a yoga instructor and thought that the way of changing business was to change business. and business was very resistant to it. Again, HR did it in a way that was inauthentic. They did it because they thought it was going to help the employees be more profitable and work more. It wasn't for the health of the employees in a sense. CEOs signed off on the budget for a wellness program begrudgingly because they didn't believe in it. The difference now, you know as well as I do, with Neptune slipping into Aries, we've gone from the spiritual escapism to a true co-creation.
Mm-hmm.
True co-creation. This is where you don't manifest, you don't do the affirmations, you don't do all the stuff that we've seen in the last 20 years. This is putting your energy and your efforts, your mind, and creating a reality that you want. The whole manifesting world in the past 20 years has been a pretty unique thing to watch. So when you and I are talking about bringing consciousness into a company, consciousness to me is not spiritual. It is tactical. It is business from the beginning. It's always been there. They have had access to, but they didn't know it because all they've thought about is the mind, the middleman. Right? These companies have been given a blank check of consciousness and they cashed it for $100. They've drastically undersold their opportunities, their resources, their abilities, and how their employees can function in the workplace because they never thought about consciousness. It's like the two fish swimming in water. When someone brings water to their attention, they ask themselves, what's water? They've never known what water is. Well, you know as well as I do, and I'm glad these discussions are getting out there. That's consciousness. You and I, your listeners, every person that's aware or unaware, we are all swimming in consciousness. And it's a vast, infinite resource that very few people tap into. So once we bring that discussion into organizations and make them aware of it, they can't unhear it. They start to change how they go about their business. They start to change how they go about division and conflict. They go about their wellness programs. So just discussions like this, it's people like you who are bringing that to the awareness of individuals. It's perfect. I think a chief consciousness officer, one that understands how this works, knows it's not going to change overnight, and there is still going to be bad employees. So the expectations for an organization that's going to hire a chief consciousness officer need to be set and understood right up front. There are going to be employees that, yeah, like you said, are counting the clock down until 4:59. What I think needs to is the levels that you're talking about, is making sure that most likely you are just going to take someone from 5th to 6th grade. Just a subtle shift. But we both know that that subtle shift on a universal level is massive across a 500 employee organization. If every single one of those 500 employees raises up just a little bit, you can't measure that. And the amount of time saved, the amount of conflict and division removed, the amount of more profit, the amount of less instances where HR has to get involved. People who are upset at work, maybe a day ago they would have kicked the dog. Maybe they go home now and they don't kick the dog. Truly just subtle shifts. Maybe someone cuts them off in traffic. Instead of honking their horn and flipping them off, they get a little angry, but they don't honk their horn and flip them off. Really subtle shifts. Helping the organization know truly the awareness of Susie and Eddie don't get along because of this. That knowledge that you and I are discussing gets planted in the brain. That is a little seed, and the universe is the best water, best gardener in the world. They may not understand what you've told them. They may not agree with it, but it's a seed that's planted and it grows. And what it does is it naturally takes this awareness and slowly starts to expand it. So instead of guessing what's outside of this awareness, they get to actually see what's out there. And when they see that, you can't talk about it in a scientific way, but when they start to expand their awareness, it's 100% of the time there's a shift. You can't unhear it. You can't unsee it. You can't unknow what's just been told. And a chief consciousness officer is going to bring in different knowledge, a different view, different questions, different perspectives, and hopefully they're a very neutral vessel that allows people to be open to opening up more. There are a significant amount of people who are feeling things they've never felt, thinking thoughts they've never thought, losing, their insecurities are coming up, stuff they've suppressed for decades, didn't even know existed, are coming up. If you've never experienced it, never felt it, and don't know how to deal with it, it creates an ungodly amount of fear. And a chief consciousness officer would come into an organization because of their neutrality. You would hear this from probably every level of employee. And when that new position is there to help them understand why that's happening, there is such a sense of relief in that individual you can't even fathom. I talked to 3 people yesterday, 2 of them buddies of my soccer buddies. One of them was their wife. All 3 of them that I talked to on the phone, you could hear them verbally and physically crying. It was bringing up so emotion. My answer to them was what you and I were discussing: the shift in planets, the shift in consciousness. It's okay. Nothing's wrong. Your job's not wrong. Your spouse isn't wrong. Your kids aren't wrong. You've done nothing wrong. There's nothing out of place. It's just this natural consciousness that's bringing up things. Release them. All 3 of those individuals were ecstatic at the end of the call. They were so relieved, and they all sent texts, and they all sent emails, and they all sent me, they followed up with calls just to say how much better they felt because someone finally gave them an understanding of what's going on. Because all 3 of them had therapists, and those therapists couldn't help them. So when you and I talk about things are going to be different, consultants are going to be different, bosses are going to be different, therapy is going to be different, self-development is going to be different, because everyone's shifting. Their DNA, their cells, their consciousness is shifting. When someone, this is where I think the most powerful thing a chief consciousness officer can do, is understand what you're talking about, but help these individuals know that nothing's wrong, nothing's out of place. They don't need to make a drastic life shift. It's not a midlife crisis. Their job and it's the natural shifting of consciousness that's bringing everything up at once and overwhelming them. And just this 2 minutes of you and I discussing is probably the most powerful part of this discussion that your listeners can listen to, because they're going to hear that and say, oh, this is not my bad karma. This is not because I did this. This is not because my job's out of place. This is not because my boss said this. This is not because my spouse and I are, is all of the stuff I've never wanted to deal with. And instead of putting 100 pounds on the bench press, the universe has put 300, and it's going to pass. And individuals at any level of consciousness hear that, there's such a sense of relief, because you and I both know that's correct. We know that's correct. That's what's happening to you and to me. It's overwhelming to me. I don't care how much teaching you have or how much experience or knowledge you have, this much coming to you at once, and there's this big of a shift, it overwhelms everybody. But that, when you brought up that last discussion, that having that discussion with people within the organization and helping them even at the CEO level, because those are really intelligent, confident people. If they start doubting themselves, if they start having thoughts, if they start worrying about stuff, that messes with them more than people who have never had that confidence. So having someone tell them why this is happening, that right there is worth a CCO's salary. There's no threat to HR. They work very cohesively together if the HR doesn't feel threatened. But there's no threat. The CCO does not replace anyone in the organization, especially HR.
Or the other CCO, the Chief Communication Officer.
Correct.
That's a different type of communicating.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah, it all works together. It just makes everyone in the C-suite and it really does. Because that individual has removed the bias, the conditioning, and most of their ego, in a sense that it just helps everyone a way that is so neutral. It just brings up everyone. There's no threat from either side. And when that happens, you've got such an open space for both sides to flourish.